Welcome to our week 11 class for biblical places here at Heritage Baptist College. I'm assisted by Doc Van back here in the back. He helps switch back and forth to my maps. We're going to do something a little bit more interesting tonight, just to stimulate, hopefully, you folks' thinking a little bit. I brought a different map to class, and I just want to start with this, see if I can get you to think a little bit. I've already shown this to Robert for a short time yesterday. I don't know that it mattered to him, particularly what it says. It's a big old map, and I don't know if it'll stay up here or not. But I had a question. How many of you could figure out where Ukraine is, after I've told you a couple of times where it is, on your maps of the Holy Land? Where's the Holy Land? Sorry, Doc, I'm making it hard for you, huh?
Nope. Just turn that a little bit over there and then might be able to see it.
Where's Israel? What? The map's right there in the book. You can't figure out where Israel is. It's bigger in here than it is on these maps we're using.
I know where it's at in my book, but I don't know where it's at on that map.
Why?
Find the Mediterranean. If you can find it on there.
What's that look like?
Good job, buddy, yes. You got it, Pearson.
Knowing that, can you figure out where Ukraine is from there?
Athene.
Where's the Black Sea? Can you guess? Where's the Mediterranean Sea? Next to what we call the Holy Land?
Right there.
Right there? Is that the Mediterranean?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Ukraine's gonna be up here.
On top.
It's gonna be way
Way
up.
up there on the, like the,
Straight up.
That's the bottom
the
end.
point right there, sir.
That's the bottom end of the Black Sea.
And Ukraine's probably right there by the point of the,
It's not on this map.
yeah, that's why I said, well, it's right in this area.
He's tricking
not
us.
on
He's
this
tricking
map.
us. It's not on this map.
No, it's up above. It's up above. You have to go
You
have
can't
more.
get there from here.
Okay.
You can't
Ukraine is
fly.
over the north edge of the Black Sea.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you were to find, Doc's gonna complicate the matter. He's gonna show you where it really is on a world
No,
size.
if you want to use it. Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah, because where things are with relation to Israel is part of our course. I'm trying to think of where's Israel in relation to us? Where are those fine Egyptian cotton sheets that are made by the Sheets Company? Where do they come from? Who knows?
You need tape.
Arabia.
No, it's not big.
No.
Come from the
Didn't
land
come
of,
from Arabia.
come from the land of Goshen.
Goshen?
And I told you that
Goshen.
way back when we first started the course.
You know, if I had my other maps here, I would have,
Uh-huh.
I could have showed you all the questions you answered or
Okay.
asked. We did
You
this
find the
last
Holy
day-
Land on this map.
last semester. It's even tinier now.
Probably not.
You know what continent this is? What's this called?
North American continent.
Okay, what's this called?
South American continent.
What's this called over?
Asia.
Come on, Stevie. What's this called?
The African continent.
What's this called?
Asia.
What's this called over here?
Russia.
Europe.
Europe.
Just to the left of Russia.
Yeah, you go to Russia and turn left. So where's the Holy Land on this map?
Go to Russia and turn left.
Where's the Holy Land on this map? Can you find it? Show me, Dan, stand up and show me.
We're
Please
talking
do.
right in this area, aren't we? Am I wrong?
Where's Italy?
Right there, where I was just
Everybody can
showing.
recognize Italy,
Yeah,
right?
Italy's right there.
Looks like a boot. It's Greece, Turkey, Syria,
Here we go.
right in there, your Holy Land. If you look real close, you might be able to see the Dead Sea.
No.
It's very hard to see because it's very small. You find the Great Salt Lake on this map over here? It's right there. It's the only body of water on the west side that has any size to it. Just compared to these lakes, my brother had asked me, believe this or not, if it was as big as one of the Great Lakes. And I said, well, if you go look on a map, you'll find can't possibly be anywhere near as big as any of them.
Well, the Great Salt Lake?
Hmm?
The Great Salt Lake can't be as
It's
big as
just
that,
tiny,
compared to the Great Lake.
and it's
yeah.
not very deep. So, next time you look at one of those round globes,
Go right to,
can you find the Holy Land on a round globe now?
I hope so, I think so, yes.
Doc is looking around for one because he knows he's got one.
I've got one, but
I've
it's in
seen it.
storage.
I have one too, but it's in storage. I have two, I think,
Okay,
I threw one away.
Can you find it on there?
probably.
I guess
How
But
about-
it's packed away
how about Korea? Do you know where Korea is?
up there.
Right there.
I've
That's
been
pink
there,
and yellow. Is Japan?
station there,
What's this?
Australia.
Australia. Where's Austria?
No such thing.
Yeah, there it is.
Go to Europe and turn right towards Russia.
Yeah, to the left.
It's up here. by
2
Germany.
blocks past the turn of Russia.
Okay, on this map, if you're looking for Ukraine, it's right there, that beige colored section.
Ukraine?
Yeah, because Russia's invading from their border.
Is it,
This is where all that war's going on, right up in here.
That's where JJ and
are
them
they
live.
still under,
Really?
is it
Yeah,
still?
they-
JJ's over here in Romania, on the edge.
Hi, JJ.
So is the battle still raging?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
They're throwing sidewinders back
They're,
and forth?
they are trying to, they're trying to invade Kiev now, which is the capital city of Ukraine. They've given up on the Donbas region and in there because they failed. Many of their soldiers are running away, many of their soldiers are calling home and telling mama they want out of there. And they don't know any way to get out of there,
Let run.
anyway.
Oh, no.
The equipment's breaking down.
So much for the fun, folks. Now we need to get back to the seriousness.
That was fun.
Woo, look at all the pretty colors.
Wow.
It's a picture of itself, taking a picture of itself.
That's
taking
all
a
we
picture
need
of
is 3 more of him, Doc.
Three
Yeah.
times, times three.
Oh, Lord.
That means three more size, what, 10 feet?
Okay, so, do you think that you've learned a little bit more about maps and relationships of places in the world where they are?
That helped,
Yeah,
that helped a lot.
So, let's go back then to the Holy Land, let's go back to the maps over here. Doc will get us back on here in a minute.
I'm having to do this.
I've got him
manually.
buried over there for a minute. I'm gonna read a little something to you here. We had just talked about the plain of Gennesaret. Remember Gennesaret was one of the names for what? Sea of Galilee, also Chinnereth. Okay. It says the name also used for the plain of Gennesaret. For the beauty and fertility, it is called the Paradise of Galilee. Its modern name is El Guir. And that's just this area over in here in Galilee. Okay? John chapter 6, verse 14, it says, Then those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, This is of a truth that prophet that should come into the world. When Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force to make him a king, he departed again into a mountain himself alone. And when even was come, now his disciples went down to the sea, and entered into a ship, and went over the sea toward Capernaum. And it was now dark, and Jesus was not come to them. Can you remember where Capernaum was?
Not at that angle.
Okay, was up here, is up the top end. We'll get it back here in just a minute. There we go. Top
It's up
end,
there.
the Sea of Galilee. You see it?
Yeah.
Capernaum. And you can see it on this map. And you can see it on this map. Okay? And it was now dark, and Jesus was not come to them. In John 6:18, he says, And the sea arose by reason of a great wind that blew. And so when they rowed about 25 or 30 furlongs, they see Jesus walking on the sea and drawing nigh unto the ship. And they were afraid. Where was Jesus just before this? Remember, we just read where he went into the mountain to pray. Get away from the press of the crowd, and he went into the mountain to pray. And now he's coming to his disciples on the sea. But he saith unto them, It is I, be not afraid. And they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at the land whither they went. At Gennesaret, Jesus taught about the need to spread God's word and the value of the sermon he had just preached at the feeding of the 5,000. People had followed him for the nourishment of their bodies rather than the survival of their eternal souls. How many freeloaders you ever see come to a potluck dinner?
Mm-hmm.
lot of them.
There's always a bunch of them. And it's okay because there's usually plenty of food at potluck dinners, you know. But we grew up in a church where they had a potluck dinner practically every Sunday, and I mean to tell you, there was more food than you can imagine. So then Jesus went to Capernaum and departed to Tyre and Sidon in Phoenicia. Tyre and Sidon. Sidon is way up here. You can see it. And there's Tyre.
Right on the
Okay.
Great Sea,
Yeah. And what's the Great Sea,
the
Dan?
Mediterranean Sea.
That's the Mediterranean Sea. Right. So when you find the Holy Land on there, you look down on it, you'll find Sidon and Tyre. Okay, that's the place we're talking about. And Jesus went to Capernaum and then departed to Tyre and Sidon in Phoenicia. From Halley's Bible Handbook, it comments on Mark chapter 7, 24 through 30. And it's entitled The Syrophoenician Woman. Told also in Matthew 15, verses 21 through 28. But in Matthew, she is called a Canaanitish woman. Now, you remember where Canaan was? We've discussed that in all these maps and these journeys. Canaan was this land here, or what we call the Holy Land, right? So she was a Canaanitish woman. It meant that she came from this area.
Where's that scripture at, the Canaanite Kings?
Matthew 15, 21 through 28.
Matthew, all right,
Mhm.
thank you.
21, you said?
Yes.
Thank you.
Phoenicians were of Canaanite descent. This was about 50 miles north of Capernaum. Okay, and you remember we had Capernaum over here. This is about 50 miles up here in this area. It says this was about 50 miles north of Capernaum, outside of Jewish territory in a region of Gentiles, the same section in which Elijah had been sent to the woman of Sarepta in 1 Kings 17, verse 9. Jesus did not mean to call her a dog. And in the verses, if you read, it can be implied, but he did not intend that. It's from verse 27, Matthew 15. He was only echoing what was in the disciples' minds. Her persistence, humility, and faith won her request. Mark 7:24. And from thence he arose and went to the borders of Tyre and Sidon, and entered into a house, and would have no man know it, but he could not be hid. For a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him, and came and fell at his feet. And the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. And since we're talking about maps and biblical places, this word Syrophoenician, okay, where was Syria? Syria was just up above here, okay, Syro. And where's Phoenicia? Look at that word right there. Phoenicia.
So a Syrophoenician, that would be a crossbreed?
Well, she was from that area. Not necessarily, she could be purebred and be a Syrophoenician, because that's where the Syrophoenicians are from.
Syro, this is only the second or third time I've ever heard that term used.
That's a country?
Well, it's a region.
It's a region.
Oh, a region.
Yeah. Geographical regions. Like you say somebody's from Sugar House, you know they're from over east of here a ways. You know, somebody's from Taylorsville or
A region of Utah.
So
Yeah.
this area here must be quite lush and green, correct?
Yeah, this is a very beautiful place.
So it's like a little oasis in a desert.
Yeah. Remember what I read to you a minute ago about the description here? It said, the plain of Gennesaret, which is not very far away from there, but it says, for beauty and fertility is called the paradise of Galilee. Well, that can't be a lot different. It's not very far away from there, right? I mean, the landscape maybe changes in 50 miles, but it isn't a great change. Anyway, Mark chapter 7, verse 30 says, and when she was come to her house, she found the devil gone out, and her daughter laid upon the bed. And again, departing from the coasts of Tyre and Sidon, he came unto the Sea of Galilee through the midst of the coasts of Decapolis. Which means he took kind of a strange journey, doesn't it? What's going on with my pointer tonight? Decapolis. Remember Decapolis? We had a sheet that had all the cities of Decapolis. This is Decapolis. This is this part here.
Did you say 6:30, sir?
With relation to what, Bob?
The last, just what you just spoke.
That was Mark 7.
Or
verse
Mark
30.
7, excuse me.
Yeah.
7:30, right?
Yeah, read, if you're writing down a note, Mark 7:24 through 7:31. Okay?
7 through what?
7:24 through 7:21.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay? They departed and went over land to Decapolis, the country of the Gadarenes, where he healed a deaf and dumb man. Where is the country of the Gadarenes? See this word here, Gadara?
Gadara, yeah.
Okay, the country of the Gadarenes. It was in this area of Decapolis. See, there's Decapolis. And that's right in there. Unger's Bible Handbook has a word here about the Decapolis. 10 cities, was situated in the region southeast of the Lake of Galilee. It was a confederation of Hellenistic towns. What does that mean? Hellenistic towns. It means they were Greeks. Okay?
Hellenistic
Yeah, Hellenistic.
means Greek.
Yeah,
Yeah, read Greek-like.
refers to Greek culture.
Why?
Because Helena was the city in Greece.
Wasn't it also a Greek god?
I don't know anything about them.
They worshipped everything, so.
So it
It
probably
says-
was.
All of these Hellenistic towns, except Scythopolis, or Basin, just west of the Jordan at the entrance to Esdraelon, were located in Transjordan, south of Tetrarch Philip's Gaulonitis. Now, if you're trying to find Gaulonitis, it's laying up in here someplace. Now, I don't remember if that's one that isn't marked. I don't recall. But it's right up in here. near Caesarea Philippi, very close to that.
So Transjordan,
In the
what's that
east-
mean? Transjordan,
Cross.
across it?
It's just, yeah, it's just talking about, Transjordan is usually talking about something that's maybe located on both sides of the Jordan River or near the Jordan River. Okay? So east of the north half of Herod Antipas' Perea, and west and north of Antipas' strolling kingdom of Nabatea. And by the time we find all of those places, it kind of puts us right back over here where we were.
Gematha.
Okay? But we're talking about the cities of Decapolis. I'm trying to think. I did something.
You did give us a handout on that.
Did I give you the handout?
I thought you did a few days ago.
I don't know if everybody got one. There it is. I knew I made enough to hand out in class. I'll put them in here. You know, I just hand them around.
Is that one? No. Other. Doc, you want one? There you go, sir.
Yeah, in case Sister Bell wants one, I'll send it to her. Keep it.
And those are our Creative Commons maps, so no problem.
Sweet, you're gonna tell her.
So the Mediterranean Sea is a great sea, right?
Mediterranean. It's
That's a great sea.
called the Great Sea here. If you look in little letters, it says Mediterranean Sea. Okay, in Mark 7, verse 32, he says, and they bring unto him one that was deaf and had an impediment of his speech. I have one of those tonight. And they beseech him to put his hand upon him. And were beyond measure astonished, saying, he hath done all things. He maketh both the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak. In Matthew 15, verse 30, it says, and great multitudes came unto him, having with them those that were lame, blind, dumb, maimed, and many others, and cast them down at Jesus' feet, and he healed them. Matthew 15:31, insomuch that the multitude wondered when they saw the dumb to speak, the maimed to behold, the lame to walk, and the blind to see. And they glorified the God of Israel. Then Jesus called his disciples unto him and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they continue with me now 3 days, and have nothing to eat. Now I will not send them away fasting, lest they faint in the way. We jump up to verse 38. It says, and they that did eat were 4,000 men. Here, he just recently fed 5,000, didn't he? Now here's 4,000 more. It says they did eat. They that did eat were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And he sent away the multitude and took ship and came into the coasts of Magdala. Into the coasts of Magdala. Did I mess up?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
Didn't get over far enough.
Mary Magdalene. Where was she from?
Magdala, right? You said?
That little pink spot right there, I believe, is Magdala. I think that's why it was marked that way. You see it?
Yeah, it says Magdala on it.
Okay.
Some people claim she's the one that was a harlot. But there's no evidence.
There's no evidence that ever said that. So, in Mark 8, verse 10, it says, and straightway he entered into a ship with his disciples and came into the paths of Dalmanutha. So we just changed books, okay? We changed from Matthew to Mark. But I'm going to show you that the same place can have two different names. Dalmanutha and Magdala are the same place. On the first two of the three maps, the ministry of Jesus, it is shown on the west side of the Sea of Galilee. Mary Magdalene, whom Jesus met in the Garden of Gethsemane and cast out 7 demons, came from this area. Magdalene means of Magdala. We see in Scripture that she was present at the crucifixion, the tomb, and other places after her healing. A comment from Unger's Bible Handbook says, after feeding the 4,000 somewhere in the northeast regions of the lake, Jesus took a boat to Magdala, the district of Dalmanutha, probably to be identified with Megdal, 3 miles northeast of Tiberias and located between it and Capernaum. In other words, just slightly north of where that pink spot is, probably is right there, is where he went to. Says, and the Pharisees came forth and began to question him, seeking of him a sign from heaven, tempting him. And he sighed deeply in his spirit, and saith, why doth this generation seek after a sign? Verily I say unto you, there shall be no sign given unto this generation. And he left them, and entering the ship again, departed to the other side being the shores of Bethsaida. Okay.
Doesn't it say somewhere else that an evil generation seeketh after
right
a sign?
there? Bethsaida. Yes, Dan,
I think it does. And
Mm-hmm.
that's correct.
he's talking about the Greeks.
According to Josephus, around the year 30 or 31, they call it CE here, that's 30 or 31 AD. Excuse me. Herod Philip II raised the village of Bethsaida in Lower Gaulonitis. Okay, now Gaulonitis was, again, is just a region. It's this Lower Gaulonitis is this region right in here. Okay, to the rank of Apollos, and renamed it Julius in honor of Livia, also called Julia Augusta, the wife of Augustus. It lay near the place where the Jordan enters the Sea of Galilee. Okay, so if you could find, if they didn't have it all covered up with other lines and stuff, that's right in there, right where the Jordan River flows in. Okay? Julias or Bethsaida was a city east of the Jordan River in a desert place, that is uncultivated ground used for grazing. If this is the location to which Jesus retired by boat with his disciples to rest a while, as Mark 6:31 and Luke 9:10 would allude to, it says that the multitude followed on foot along the northern shore of the lake, who would cross the Jordan by the ford at its mouth, which is used by foot travelers to this day. The desert of the narrative is just the barrier of the Arabs, where animals are driven out for pasture. The green grass of Mark 6:39 and the much grass of John 6:10 point to some place in the plain of El Betejah, on the rich soil of which the grass is green and plentiful, compared to the scanty herbage on the higher slopes. Okay, because they're mountaintops, they're just a short distance away from here. Mark 8:22 says, and he cometh to Bethsaida, and they bring a blind man unto him, and besought him to touch him. And after that he put his hands upon his eyes, and made him look up, and he was restored, and saw every man clearly. That's Mark 8:25. Caesarea Philippi. It's another place that is right in the same area.
I got a question for you, Jerry.
All right.
The Jordan River, I noticed that it flows quite a ways south of the Sea of Galilee. Does it also flow north up towards
No, it comes from the north and it flows down like this.
so it goes all the way down past the Sea of Galilee and down to the
And
other
it flows back out. This is also,
Dead ends at the Dead Sea.
it stops in the Dead Sea. That makes sense?
Yes.
The Jordan River stops at the Dead Sea.
Everything stops at the Dead Sea.
That's
That's why it's dead.
Yeah.
Okay,
We got a Dead Sea right here in Utah.
yeah. Caesarea Philippi, or Caesarea of Philip, was rebuilt and enlarged by his son Herod the Great. Its name has been Paneas in honor of the nature god Pan, worshipped there, but was changed to Caesarea in honor of the then reigning Caesar Tiberius. It was thus distinguished from the city of Caesarea built by Herod the Great on coastal Palestine. The city of Caesarea is where Paul, we'll see later in his missionary journeys, he took refuge in that Caesarea, but that's way, if it was on this map, it's way over here. If you could see the border of that map coming down like this, Caesarea sets over here to the east of Jerusalem, or west of Jerusalem, excuse me. But this Caesarea Philippi was up in here in this area around this Bethsaida. Okay. It says, at this center sacred to paganism in proximity to the Panian grotto in the foothills of Mount Hermon, at the main source of the Jordan. Okay, where does the Jordan come from? If you follow it up here, you see Mount Hermon's up in here. And it says, it is significant Jesus broached the subject of his deity. Nearby was an exquisite temple of marble built by Herod the Great in honor of Caesar Augustus. Mark chapter 8, verse 27, and Jesus went out and his disciples into the towns of Caesarea Philippi. And by the way, he asked his disciples, saying unto them, whom do men say that I am? In verse 29, and he saith unto them, but whom say ye that I am? And Peter answereth and saith unto him, thou art the Christ. Luke 9, verse 28. And it came to pass about 8 days after these sayings, he took Peter and John and James and went up to a mountain to pray. This is the Mount of Transfiguration, otherwise known on our map as Mount Hermon. And the full story is in Luke chapter 9, 28 through 36. We'll not cover in class here, but you can look it up. You find Mount Hermon?
The reason why I asked you about that Jordan River, because the Jordan River north of the Sea of Galilee looks like it's a little trickle compared to the river.
See that right there, Mount Hermon? You see where that river comes from? Flows down from. This is the Mount of Transfiguration we're talking about here now. Okay. Mark 9, verse 17 says, and one of the multitude answered and said, Master, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit. Verse 23, Jesus said unto him, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. Verse 27, but Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And we go back to Luke chapter 9, verse 29, said, as he prayed, the fashion of his countenance was altered, his raiment was white and glistering. And verse 37, it says, and it came to pass that on the next day, when they were come down from the hill, much people met him. Jesus and his disciples traveled then from Mount Hermon to Capernaum, where the tax collectors demanded payment. Came down from Mount Hermon, way up here. Where's Capernaum? Right here. Right? Find Capernaum?
Right there.
Yeah.
On the other one.
Where Jesus headquartered most of the time there during his
According to
ministry.
that scale, it should be about 50 miles.
So Matthew 17:27, he says, notwithstanding lest we should offend them, go thou to the sea and cast an hook and take up the fish that first cometh up. So he's not going to offend these tax collectors.
Pay taxes.
He's going to pay his taxes. He
With
says,
fish.
take up the fish that first cometh up, and when thou hast opened his mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money. That take and give it unto them for me and thee. How do you like to have your taxes paid that way?
No fish.
Tell that one to the IRS.
Yes. Just go over to the Great Salt Lake and catch a handful of them brine shrimp,
My
and open
taxes
them up,
are
and
over
the money
there,
will
yeah.
be in there. Right. And it came to pass as he went to Jerusalem that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. Okay, here's his trip right here. See that? Is this Samaria? Is this Galilee?
Mm-hmm.
And there's Samaria.
Right.
Okay. Luke 17:12, and as he entered into a certain village, there met him 10 men that were lepers, which stood afar off. In verse 14, and when he saw them, he said unto them, go show yourselves unto the priests. And it came to pass that as they went, they were cleansed. As they arrived at Bethany, Jesus and the disciples were warmly welcomed. Where was Bethany? Way down here. That's it?
So we went from Samaria to Bethany?
Right there,
Right there.
by Jerusalem.
That's a good walk.
Yeah. It says, now it came to pass as they went that he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister named Mary, called Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. And he went to Jerusalem. When he went to Jerusalem, he healed a blind man. John 9, verse 1, as Jesus passed by, he saw a man that was blind from his birth. In verse 6 says, when he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And verse 7, and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation sent. And if we saw the city of Jerusalem, you'd see on the diagram where this pool of Siloam is, and we'll show you that later. If you try to remember this story, point it out to you. He attended several Jewish celebrations, including the Feast of Tabernacles and the Feast of Dedication. He then departed Jerusalem for Bethabara. Does everybody remember where Bethabara was? Does anybody remember? It's right in this area here. That's where
Yeah.
he was baptized
Where's
by
Beth
John
Rama?
the Baptist.
Is that what we're looking for? Beth Rama?
Bethabara.
Beth Abra, that's a different.
Same general area.
Yeah. John 10:22, and it was at Jerusalem at the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter. 23, and Jesus walked in the temple of Solomon's porch. 24, then came the Jews round about him and said unto him, how long dost thou make us to doubt? If thou be the Christ, tell us plainly. Verse 25, Jesus answered them, I told you, and you believe not. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me. 26, but ye believe not, because ye are not of my sheep, as I said unto you. 27, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. 28, and I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. And 29, my Father which gave them me is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. And 29, my Father which gave them me is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. And 30, I and my Father are one. Verse 31, then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. Guess they didn't believe him, huh?
So Jesus never did claim he was God, right?
That's what they keep saying.
I and my Father are one, you tell me. Therefore they sought again to take him. It says, then the Jews took up stones again to stone him, therefore they sought again to take him, but he escaped out of their hand. And he travels to Bethabara. It says, these events took place during Jesus' last months before crucifixion at approximately age 33. John chapter 10, verse 40, and went away again beyond Jordan into the place where John at first baptized, and there he abode. And Jesus chose out 70 missionaries. Now don't miss this, because pardon me, it's a really important part of his ministry. It says, he chose out 70 missionaries and sent them out with a message to repent to all the places where he had ministered. Luke 10:1, after these things the Lord appointed another 70 also, and sent them 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place whither he himself had come. Verse 17, and the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name. Verse 24, Jesus says, for I tell you that many prophets and kings have desired to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. Then Jesus is called to Bethany. In John 11, verse 1, now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. Therefore his sisters sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. Now, we knew that Jesus had a friend named Lazarus, and he lived in Bethany, didn't he? There's Bethany. Okay? It says, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. Then after that saith he to his disciples, let us go into Judea again. Where's Judea? Well, where was he? Well, he's over here in Moab. He wasn't over here in Judea. Okay? He's over here. It said, and he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot. This is John 11:44. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, loose him and let him go. And Jesus went out from Bethany to Ephraim. And Jesus therefore walked no more openly among the Jews, but went thence unto a country near to the wilderness, in a city called Ephraim, and there continued with his disciples. From Ephraim, Jesus and his disciples went into Perea. Now, if you look down in here, here's Perea. Okay, it's not very far from where he was. Okay, right in here. And our map shows the cities of Zia, Gadara, and Tyros on this tour. We are not told of the exact cities where he preached, but that's this loop that we're seeing up here. Okay, see Tyros,
Tyros and Gadara.
Gadara,
Mhm.
okay, Zia.
Yeah.
And it must have been a regular route they took.
There's probably a path that they followed there. It says, we are not told the exact cities where he preached. Luke 13 verse 10 says, and he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. Verse 12, and Jesus saw her, and he called her to him, and said unto her, woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. Luke 18 verse 15, they brought unto him also infants, and he would touch them, but his disciples saw it, and they rebuked him. In verse 16, but Jesus called them unto him and said, suffer little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of God. Verse 17 said, verily I say unto you, whosoever shall not receive the kingdom of God as a little child shall in no wise enter therein. And as he returned to Bethany from Perea, a blind man is healed. We go to Mark chapter 10. So he's probably right in here. There's Ephraim, and he's getting ready to come back down to Bethany. And so then they came to Jericho, and as he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a number of people, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the highway side begging.
So he followed that path and then went all the way around and back by Judea.
Yeah, and he came back down into Judea.
Okay.
Actually, it shows him going this way.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
and then he came
Okay.
back to Bethany.
So he went,
It looks like about a 20-mile round trip.
Yeah, it's probably about that. Something real close
If
to
you
that.
follow that guy over there, it's
Jesus said unto him, go thy way, thy faith hath made thee whole. He said this to blind Bartimaeus. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus in the way. Jesus didn't even touch him. He just said, receive your sight.
no spittle, no clay, no nothing. Just
His faith didn't require a sign. Mark 11:1, and when they came nigh to Jerusalem unto Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, he sendeth forth two of his disciples. In verse 7, they brought the colt to Jesus and cast their garments on him, and he sat upon him. In verse 11, and Jesus entered into Jerusalem and into the temple, and when he had looked round about upon all things, now the eventide was come, he went out unto Bethany with the 12. And John chapter 12, verse 1, says, and Jesus 6 days before the Passover came to Bethany, where Lazarus had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. Verse 3 says, then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Our map's commentary up here says the common people proclaimed him as king, when he rode triumphantly into Jerusalem on a donkey, even as the members of the Jewish Sanhedrin were plotting his death. And in preparation for the Last Supper in Luke chapter 22, verse 1, it says, "Now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover, and the chief priests and scribes sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people." Luke 22, verse 8, "And he sent Peter and John, saying, Go and prepare us the Passover, that we may eat." Luke 22:14, "When the hour was come, he sat down, and the 12 apostles with him." Okay, and we're at a point where we need to stop, and next week we will start a different map. But you know the crucifixion story as it went from where we left you here. That was all the travel that Jesus did. The rest of his travel was inside Jerusalem, into the various palaces and so forth where he was tried, and then to Golgotha, which is up in the northwest corner of the city of Jerusalem, just outside the city, I should say.
So he went there first?
He did all these things that we
He
talked
went there
about first. Before, and now they're getting ready to do the
And
Last
then he'll
Supper.
go to Jerusalem.
Okay, and then the Last Supper, the Garden of Gethsemane, and all of those things took place in that next week. So we leave his travels there because he doesn't travel to any new places. And next week we will take up Palestine in New Testament times. And remember, Palestine is not a country. There are people in this world who try to make Palestine a country, but it is not.
Right?
It's a region.
It's a region.
Oh,
It's what we call the Holy Land, or at one time was called Canaan. Okay? It's Palestine, but now they're trying to say they've got Palestinians. You know, I had a guy that I worked with that he claimed he was a Palestinian, and I says, then you're a nobody, because there's no such place as Palestine. He really got mad about that, but I told him, I said, and his name was Ahmed, by the way. But I told him, I said, there's never been a country named Palestine. If there ever becomes Palestine, there's going to be a horrible war.
That'll be right before Armageddon.
Might be Armageddon.
Yeah.
All right, folks, that's it. We're done for this week. Next week, we canceled Thanksgiving week. That was last week, and we're technically a week behind, although it doesn't take us long to catch up here in the next couple maps. So we're going to call it good for tonight. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being patient with me and my poor pronunciation.